Do you know those people in your life who always actually seem to step towards the impossible? They see the same gaps you see, they have the same limitations, but they always seem to step forward. What is the difference between someone who will step forward and someone who steps back? I want to tell you the difference. It's a biblical thing. This is a life principle that will lead you to step forward when everyone else steps back. And here's the life principle. I think it's the principle that Moses lives by. It's the principle that David lived by when he went to face Goliath. Here it is. Live in such a way that shows off the greatness of God. Or to say it in a maybe more memorable way, something you can pass on to your kids, live in such a way that puts God's greatness on display. This is the difference between someone who'll step forward and someone who'll step back. It's the greatness of God. People who think like this see the gap between them and obedience, and they welcome it because they know that in that gap, God will be made great. Your limitations are actually an opportunity to put on display the greatness of God. Nothing to shy away from. It's nothing to fear. I think about this and I'm immediately reminded of so many biblical stories. And so many times where God says, do not fear. And so many times where he says, trust me. And now for the 5th, 6th, maybe 7th time in this first sermon of Moses in Deuteronomy, he says, trust the Lord, take the step, trust the Lord. And if you are at North Boulevard and it's starting to feel redundant, like why, again, okay, trust God and take a step of obedience. Obey God even when it's hard. That's kind of been the sermon lately, hasn't it? I'll tell you why. The Bible hits it again and again. Because when you're looking at your gap, your mind is powerful, guys. Your mind is powerful enough to justify disobedience. You can look at your limitations, you can look at the gap, and say to yourself, it's okay if I disobey. That's how powerful the human mind is. And so Moses hits again, and he hits it again. Trust the Lord. Take a step forward and obey, despite this gap, for the greatness of God. Not because of yourself, but for the greatness of God. And here are some practical ways to do that. The first thing is this. Take your eyes off of the gap and place them onto God. That's actually a practical step. If you spend more time talking about the way you just are, I'm just an angry person. I just don't have the time. I just don't have the resources. That's keeping your eyes on your own gap and not on the power or the greatness of God. And like I said, leadership is coming in and saying, no, let's direct your attention to God, which is what Moses does. And the reason he does that is because if you're waiting for your gap to fill, if you're waiting for the conditions to be right, if you're waiting until you know absolutely everything in the Bible before you make disciples, if you're waiting until you have a 5,000 square foot home before you start caring for people, if you're waiting until your bank account is in the tens, if not hundreds or millions of dollars before you start giving, you will wait forever. You'll miss your opportunity to obey. The gap won't fill, not until we take a simple step of obedience in faith and God himself takes care of the rest. So that leads me to point number 2, and that is, just start with what you have. Start with what you have. And trust God to provide the rest. If you have, I don't know, randomly here, shooting from the hip, just $600 laying around that maybe you didn't expect. Start with that. If you have a spare bedroom, start with that. If you have a DBS bookmark that just kind of sits in the floorboard of your car, or then it's on the dresser at home, or then it ends up in the nightstand. Start with that and start making disciples. Whatever you have, just go. And that's not settling, by the way. That's starting. That's faith. We'll start. We'll get started. Here's why we would do that. If you think about a life like that, one who walks towards what seems impossible and not away from it, that life is so inspiring. A life like that inspires people to worship God. A life like that inspires people to worship God. It's the difference, moms, of saying, children, you need to worship the Lord, and in saying, children, you need to worship the Lord, and then seeing the greatness of God in your life.
Hey, I'm John.
And I'm Abby, and we are the hosts of Boulevard Online.
Hey, thanks for watching this video today. If you enjoyed it, give us a big thumbs up by hitting the subscribe button right down below.
The full message that this clip is from is linked right here, or if you'd like to watch some other videos, you can click right here.
Hey, if you'd like to find out more about North Boulevard, go to northboulevard.com. Until next time, be blessed.
And don't forget to be a blessing.